弟兄姐妹平安，欢迎大家来到 EMI 教会。那现在就让我们一起来敬拜我们的阿爸父。亲爱的天父，我们呼求你的名，主，求你的圣灵运行在这里，你亲自降下从你而来的安慰跟盼望，在我们的生命里面。
自由的灵充满我，无法控制来淹没我，神灵的风吹向我，你喜乐是我所追求，沉浸在神灵里，无限的畅饮，飘舞在神灵里，脱离地心引力，沉浸在神灵里，无限的畅饮，飘舞在神灵里，脱离地心引力。无法停止跳跃摆动我，不顾一切我要钻进天堂，在风与你飞向海阔天空，圣灵或是江河涌流，自由的灵充满我，无法控制来淹没我，圣灵的风吹向我，你喜乐是我所追求，沉浸在神灵里，无限的畅饮，飘舞在神灵里，脱离地心引力，沉浸在神灵里，无限的畅饮，飘舞在神灵里，脱离地心引力。无法停止跳跃摆动我，不顾一切我要钻进天堂，在风与你飞向海阔天空，神灵或是江河涌流，沉浸在神灵里，无限的畅饮，飘舞在神灵里，脱离地心引力，沉浸在神灵里，无限的畅饮，飘舞在神灵里，脱离地心引力。无法停止跳跃摆动，不顾一切我要钻进天堂，在风与你飞向海阔天空，神灵或是江河涌流，无法停止跳跃摆动我，不顾一切我要钻进天堂，在风与你飞向海阔天空，神灵或是江河涌流。
亲爱的上帝，我们赞美你，阿爸父，你是我们的盼望。主，你的宝血涂抹遮盖在我们的身上，你亲自来保抱喂养所有你的孩子们。
要上芦苇，它不折断，将山动后，它不吹熄，生命气息向我吹起，你同在，永远都不曾离开，你是我盼望，如晨曦的光，指引我的道路有力量，你是我盼望，如星宿的光，牵引我前方路 有指望。压上芦苇，它不折断，像残灯火，它不吹熄。生命气息向我吹起，你同在，永远都不曾离开。你是我盼望如晨曦的光，指引我的道路有力量。你是我盼望如星宿的光，牵引我前方路有指望。你是我盼望如晨曦的光，指引我的道路有力量。你是我盼望如星宿的光，牵引我前方路有指望。双手，你为我舍命，得胜的盼望都来自于你。日月和星辰在你手里，我气息，我生命都属于你。你定恒双手，你为我舍命，得胜的盼望都来自于你。日月和星辰在你手里，我气息，我生命都属于你。你是我盼望如星稀的光，指引我的道路有力量。你是我盼望如星宿的光，牵引我前方路有指望。双手为我舍命，得胜的盼望都来自于你。日月和星辰在你手里，我气息，我生命都属于你。我气息，我生命都属于你。
天父，你掌权作王在我们的生命里面，我们的气息，我们的生命都属于你。阿爸父，求你亲自光照我们每个人，你带来医治，你亲自来触摸我们的生命，让我们有办法单单的仰望在天父你的身上。求主，你再次点燃我们对你的热情。
主，我单单仰望你，不愿再迷失流离。我 我成长的足迹，因为我有你，我放下我自己，找回起初的心。我已做了决定，要前行，跟随你。贴近你，靠近你，心跳声音，我愿意。在与你共同经历，点燃我灵，点燃我倾倒所有我生命的热情，贴近你，靠近你，心跳声音，我愿意。在与你共同经历，点燃我灵，点燃我倾倒所有我生命的热情。主，我单单仰望你，走在你石榴里，我成长的足迹，因为我有你，我放下我自己，找回起初的心，我已做了决定，要全心跟随你，贴近你，靠近你，心跳声音，我愿意。在与你共同经历，点燃我灵，点燃我倾倒所有我生命的热情，贴近你，靠近你，心跳声音，我愿意。在与你共同经历，点燃我灵，点燃我倾倒所有我生命的热情。贴近你，靠近你，心跳声音，我愿意。在与你共同经历，点燃我灵，点燃我倾倒所有，只为你。贴近你，靠近你，心跳声音，我愿意。在与你共同经历，点燃我灵，点燃我倾倒所有
的上帝，求你垂听孩子们的祷告。阿爸父，求你再次的点燃我们对你的热情。主，你挪去那帕子，你挪去那黑暗，你让我们有办法单单的仰望着你，单单的相信沉浸在你那无条件的爱里面。主，你的光战胜那黑暗，你的光战胜那死亡。天父，你是死人也是活人的主，你是带来医治的主。耶稣，求你更多更多的教导我们，让我们的生命都有办法更多的向耶稣的爱，向耶稣的样子来靠近。在这周有感到疲惫的，不管在工作上，在关系上，天父，你现在就亲自来触摸我们每个人的生命，我们每个人的灵魂。主，你的恩手要来安慰我们，要来医治我们。阿爸父，我们现在就把我们所有一切的重担交托在你的宝座面前。耶稣，求你亲自来帮助我们，帮我们担那牢重的担子。主，我们相信你，我们赞美你，我们谢谢你。以上祷告，孩子奉主耶稣基督得胜的名求，阿们。弟兄姐妹，我们可以一同坐下。那现在就让我们来看教会使命的影片。
Well, good morning, EMI Taiwan. I am recording this from my home in Scotland, so I'm not too sure about the quality, but I will try my best. So as always, it's wonderful to spend a Sunday with you. So at the end of this video, I will also post a little video about Scotland so you can see what my home country looks like. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, shall we? I want to start with a story about two sisters who go to a funeral of a very distant relative. And one of the sisters starts talking to a cousin that is sitting beside her. And she goes through the general conversation. And then in the course of the conversation, she said, "Hey, I wonder, how is your mum doing?" To which the cousin's eyes got really big and looked at her and said, "Not too good. This is my mum's funeral." So sometimes the best thing to say in difficult situations is absolutely nothing. So today we're going to be looking at the book of Job and the qualities of friendship from the book of Job. And one of the things we have to say is that friendship is indispensable to our lives. From our childhood to old age, friendships are the thing that carries us through our lives. You know, from our kindergarten to college, through our careers, our marriages, having children, and even through suffering a loss of a loved one. It's our friends that stand by us and help us to make sense of it all. And you know, friendship and having friends in your life, it teaches us social skills. It helps us to know how to relate to each other, how to laugh at ourselves, how to not take ourselves so seriously, and how to get back up when life knocks us down. And friendship, according to social science, also keeps us very healthy, because research has told us that people who don't have friends, who don't have a good social circle of friends, it's as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And also, good friends are going to tell you when you're not quite doing things right. You know, a good friend's going to tell you when you have spinach in your teeth, and they're going to call you out when you're wrong. But they're still going to stand with you when things fall apart in your life. So friends are indispensable to having a good life. But friendship is not perfect. The very people who are your good friends are the friends who will at some point disappoint you, let you down, hurt your feelings, get into an argument with, disagree with, they will bring you to tears. But still, you cannot have a good life without friends. And we see a little of this tension when we look at the relationship between Job and his friends. You know, and he had 3 really good friends, 3 godly men who loved him. And when they realized that Job was in trouble, they showed up for him. They sat with him. They sympathized with him. And as far as friends go, these guys were good guys. They were good friends. But even with the best of intentions, these men went awry. The minute they tried to explain Job's pain and suffering, when they tried to spiritualize it all, their help begins to go downhill. So they were very well meaning as friends, but were a little bit inept in carrying out their friendship. And so that's why I've entitled today's talk, Danger Christians at Work. So let's go ahead and read the scripture together, shall we? It's from Job chapter 2, verses 11 to 13. And so you can read along with me if you like. It starts like this. When Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz and the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamanite, heard about the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their clothes and sprinkled dust on their head, and they sat on the ground with him. For 7 days and 7 nights, no one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. So here are 3 friends who find out that their friend is in trouble, their friend is suffering, and with a good heart, they set out to comfort him and sympathize with him. However, it doesn't all go well, because when they try to put Job's suffering into their spiritual box, that's when things begin to fall apart. However, there are 4 things I think we can take away from the lessons from Job's friends. And the first one is this. First of all, they showed up. As soon as they heard that Job was in trouble, they came to him. You know, I don't know if you've ever gone through a crisis and really what you really wanted was just someone to be with you. And maybe you went through a breakup. Maybe it was the loss of a job. Maybe it was a loss of a family member. And you just wanted a friend to be there, and they didn't show up. You know, and sometimes our friends are just too busy. But Job's friends, they showed up. They came when he needed them. It says in verse 11, they set out from their home. So in other words, these three men, they dropped what they were doing. They were not too busy for Job. They left their families. They probably took time off of their job to go and be with their friend. They made the effort, and they also gave up their time. For them, it was not too inconvenient for them to go and be with their friend. Their friend was in trouble, and they were going to help. So good friends, they show up and are willing to give up their time and to make the effort to be there with you. And I think sometimes what we experience sometimes as friends, we just think it's easier to shoot off a text, because we're not sure that we know what to do when we're face to face with our friends. So we just shoot off a text that says, sorry to hear what you're going through. Let me know if you need anything. And I think sometimes as Christians, we're afraid to show up for our friends because we feel like we don't have the right thing to say, that we don't know what will be the right thing to say. And so we just don't show up. And, Jesus, he experienced the exact same thing. He knew what it was like for his friends to not show up. Because when Jesus was arrested in the garden, what did his friends do? His friends took off. His friends left. When he was on trial, there was nobody there to speak for him, nobody to defend him, or to even just be there by his side. Jesus knew what it was like to go through the worst experience of his life and to go through it alone when his friends didn't show up. Of course, Peter eventually showed up, but even then, Peter kept his distance and didn't want to be associated with Jesus. So when Job's life fell apart, his friends showed up. And I think that's the first lesson that we can learn is don't underestimate the ministry of just showing up. You don't have to have the right words. You just have to be there. If you're a good friend, just show up when your friend is in trouble. The second thing I think we can learn from Job's friends is they shut up, right? It says in verse 13, for 7 days and 7 nights, no one said a word to him. So for 7 days, 7 nights, Job's friends didn't say anything. They didn't immediately try to fix his problem, solve the problem. They didn't immediately begin to give him a sermon or tell him what worship songs he should listen to. Sometimes when people are hurting, it's your presence that they want. They don't need our Christian platitudes, our Christian cliches. I think it's easy for us as Christians to kind of reach into our spiritual box and pull out our Christian cliches, hoping that something in there will be of help for our friend. And maybe you've even heard some of those cliches. Things like people will quite often say, well, God will never give you more than you can handle. And you know what? That sounds like a compliment, doesn't it? It sounds like the person saying, you're strong, you're brave, you can cope, right? But the thing is, our friend is not coping. At this point in their life, you're basically asking them to swim in a tsunami, right? It's just not possible for them to do that. And so what we really want to do is say, you know what, instead of saying, you can handle this problem, maybe we want to say, let me handle something for you. Let me maybe pick up your kids. Maybe let me pick up your food for you. Let me handle your laundry, something like that. Another sort of Christian cliche that we often pull out is we say, well, maybe God was trying to get your attention. And you're basically judging their walk with God. We're just saying your walk isn't up to standard. It's like saying, you weren't listening to God. And so therefore God's had to, bring this problem on you to wake you up, or basically you're being spiritually careless and that's why this problem has come to you, so you deserve it. I mean, really, maybe it's a well-meaning saying, but ouch, that is painful. The other thing people often say is when God shuts a door, he opens a window. But I think at this point, your friend is thinking, okay, I hope God opens a window. I hope it's on the 5th floor, and I hope you jump out of it. Because at this point, the friend is feeling that you're not of any help whatsoever. Because what we're doing is we're skipping over the emotions of our friend. You know, we're jumping to, there's a silver lining. If the door is closed, but hey, don't worry about it, there's going to be an open window. And so it's like we dismiss their suffering altogether, and we're rushing towards having a silver lining. Everything's going to work out. It'll work out okay. And so as Christians, we need to be okay with not saying anything, with not trying to fix it. You know, I know as Christians, we feel under pressure to say just the right thing that will miraculously bring our friend out of their suffering. But sometimes our Christian cliches are like, I don't know, like handing somebody a Band-Aid when they've lost a limb, you know. So I think the second thing that we can learn from this story, that sometimes the best thing we can do as a good friend, the best thing we can say as a good friend, is to say nothing at all, to just sit there with our friends. But as Job's situation was not getting any better, Job's friends felt that they could hold their tongue no longer. And so the third thing that happens is then they spoke up. First of all, they showed up. They shut up, but then they started talking. And the moment they opened their mouth, it went downhill from there. Instead of comforting Job, they start to correct him, accuse him, and even judge him. Because Job's suffering didn't fit into their spiritual box. He should be getting better. These things shouldn't keep going from bad to worse. I mean, so far he's lost his business, he's lost his family, and now he's lost his health. His body is being struck with one terrible affliction after the other. And so something just doesn't make sense. Something is not right, and it doesn't line up with their theology. And so there has to be a reason. There has to be a reason why this is happening. And it is true that whenever bad things happen to ourselves or to good people, we're always asking, why? Why did this happen? Why is this happening to me? Why did my boyfriend leave me? Why did my father have to pass away? In difficult times, we often look for a reason why. And Job's friends are no different. They believe there must be a reason for Job's suffering. And in fact, one of our other popular Christian things to say in times of trouble is that we sometimes say, well, maybe this is happening for a reason. And the problem with saying that is that it puts the focus on the meaning and not on the person. It shifts our attention away from their pain towards our need for an answer. It becomes about me. It becomes about I need an answer. And it reflects our need for control. Because if there's a reason for this, then maybe we can avoid it. If we know why this has happened, then we can make sure we change our behavior so that it doesn't happen to us. And secondly, it puts the blame on the person, because we're basically saying, look, you brought this on yourself. You must have sinned. You know, you must have sinned in some way for all of this to happen. And so you see Job's friends begin to search for that answer. What was the sin that Job committed that has caused all this pain and suffering to come upon him? You know, so Job is a lack of faith. You know, Job, if you just had more faith, you would be getting better, not sicker. You would be getting healed by now. And really what we're saying is the healing is in your hands, Job. If you just believe, if you just have enough faith. And basically we're taking the power of healing out of God's hands and we're putting it into our own hands so that we have to have the belief. Or they're searching, they're saying, well, you must have sinned, Job. You know, search your mind, Job. You must have done something that really offended the Lord. And so, you know, what is it you did wrong? And they start this kind of questioning quite gently in the beginning, but as you see, as the chapters go on, they get a little bit harsher and a little bit harsher with Job, because this doesn't fit with their theology. And even although Job himself says, look, I'm not perfect. Yes, I'm pretty sure I have sinned, but I don't believe that this is the type of suffering my sin deserves. This is something different. Job is saying, look, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm angry. I'm confused. But I still believe that God is with me in this. So I think what we can learn from this is that being a good friend sometimes means we have to be okay with not having an answer, with not having a reason as to why our friend is in trouble, why our friend is suffering. Our Christian hope, it doesn't rest with knowing why something happens. It rests with knowing that God is still with us when bad things happen. So sometimes the most comforting thing we can say to our friends is, look, I don't understand either, but I'm with you, and I know that God is with you too. And I think the fourth thing that we can take away from this is that as friends, they made up. The good news is that in the end, they still remained good friends. And I think we need to understand that our friendships are not perfect relationships. They're not without their ups and downs. Good friends, we're going to disagree with each other, we'll fight with each other, we can fall out with each other, but in the end, we need to make up with each other. And if we're honest, we ourselves are not perfect friends, so why do we expect our friends to be perfect friends to us? And so we see in the end that God kind of steps in and sets things to right. And we see first in Job chapter 42, verse 7, God says to Eliphaz, he says, hey, you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. Now, this must have surprised Eliphaz and the other two friends, because as far as they're concerned, they're saying all the right Christian things. And to their mind, on the other hand, Job is saying all the wrong Christian things. He's not been humble enough to admit that he's sinned. Job's always complaining. He's questioning God. He's even losing his temper with God. So how come God thinks that Job spoke rightly and we spoke wrongly? So it must have been a bit of a surprise. But the main reason was because Job was honest. He didn't fake his spirituality. He didn't try to pretend he understood what was happening when he didn't. He spoke honestly to God, and he didn't hold back. And the second thing was he spoke to God, instead of about God, whereas his friends tend to speak about God and about God's ways of doing things. And Job, he admitted that he didn't understand. He said, I don't get it. I don't like it. But I still believe in God. While his friends were trying to say, look, we have full knowledge about this situation. We understand what's wrong here. So we just need to help you discover what you've done wrong so this can all be put to right. So in the end, the main fault of Job's friends wasn't their intention. They had really good intentions. They wanted to bring comfort to Job. They wanted him to be healed and be released of all their suffering. But the error was the assumption that they had all the answers to Job's healing. And they spoke as if they had God all figured out. But God pretty much reveals that his ways are higher than our ways. And all we can do at times is just trust him. So even our best friends will make mistakes with us, say hurtful things to us, let us down. But that doesn't mean we should break our friendship with them. We should pray, forgive, and move forward. And we see this when in the next verse, in Job 42, verse 8, the Lord says this, my servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. In other words, according to your stupidity. And basically God is saying, look, you guys were dumb. What you were saying wasn't helpful. And really, if it was up to me, I'd just give you a whack, on the back of the head and try and bring you to your senses. But I already know the heart of Job, and Job's going to pray for you. And I know he's going to pray that nothing bad happens to you, that I don't punish you. And so therefore, what we see in that is that Job is a man who is not going to hold a grudge against his friends. He's not going to keep a record of their wrongs. And I think in the end, we see in Job that he understood his friends' good intentions, just a pretty poor execution. So what are the things we can take away from this lesson today? And that is, when our friends are in trouble, when they're suffering, and even if the trouble they're in is trouble of their own making, if it was something is happening to them because of their own stupidity, we don't need to look for a reason. We can't ever assume that we know what God is doing in someone else's life. We have to have a little bit of humility and know that we don't have a magical spiritual phrase that's going to miraculously evaporate all the problems, pain, and suffering of our friends. But we can be there, and we can be a good friend. And there are 4 things that we can learn to be a good friend when our friends are in trouble. And that is, when they're in a hard time, a good friend shows up. We just show up. We drop what we're doing and we show up. Secondly, a good friend knows when to shut up and when to just sit there silently with our friend. And good friends, we don't need to know the reason. We don't need to search for the why. We just need to be there. And when things are difficult, when we say the wrong thing, when we hurt our friends or our friends hurt us, then good friends will make up and put their friendship back together again. So I hope these things are helpful in your walk with your friends. I know they are as I walk with my friends. So let's pray together. Lord, I just thank you that you have surrounded us with good friends. And I ask, Lord, that you would, in our hearts, that we would begin afresh and new to value our friendships, that we would remember to thank our friends for being there for us, that we would remember how valuable they are in our life, how much they give to us and how much they mean to us. Remind us, Lord, to tell them how much we love them. Remind us to hug them, Lord, and encourage them. And I pray, Lord, that when our friends are in trouble, that we will show up. And Lord, that we will just sit with them, that we won't try to fix it or find answers for the problem, that we will be there. And Lord, when we make a mistake, or when our friends make a mistake, that we will be quick to forgive and quick to make up and heal our friendships. So Lord, I pray that you would bring more abundance of life to our friendships and in this church and all our churches within EMI. And we ask it, Lord, for your glory. Amen. So now I'm going to leave you with a little video about Scotland. Okay, so it's good spending Sunday with you. Bye.
现在是奉献的时间，然后跟大家说明一下，奉献之于基督徒是很重要的一部分。我们将上帝赐予我们的一切，然后将一部分交还给他，并且感谢上帝赐予我们每日的所需所用。然后我们稍后一下哦。我们前面这里有空的信封袋，可以前来取用，然后将你的奉献放进这个奉献袋里面，然后再放进这个奉献篮之中。然后还有我们后面这里线上有那个线上奉献的账户资讯，如果你习惯使用线上奉献的方式，也欢迎你使用线上奉献的账户资讯。那我们给大家一点时间预备自己的奉献，待会我们一起为我们的奉献做祷告。好，那我们一起来为我们今天的奉献来做祷告。我们一起来低头祷告。亲爱的天父，我们感谢你赐予我们每日所需所用。我的神啊，我们知道你是喜悦正直的人，然后鉴察人心。我们将手上的奉献交在你的面前，求你悦纳我们的奉献。以上祷告还是奉靠主耶稣圣名祈求，阿们。现在是那个宣布事项的时间。